during 2018 and 19, you were in fact working in Japan.
Yes.
And not only working in Japan, but choosing a quarry to work in and to make a form of sculpture.
Yes.
So can we have a chat in this segment about your work Ascending, which is on a huge scale in a really difficult location. I don't even know how you got to this quarry in Japan, let alone built a staircase in it. Can you just start us off with some setting of the scene? Why on earth are you there?
Yes.
How did you find it?
Yes. Well, when I first went to Japan, I went to this area because it had just received special national heritage status for its stone. It was famous for its stone quarries. And in my initial research, having never been to Japan, I said I'm looking for stone quarries, clay pits, earth, where they move earth, didn't really know. And so one of the people I spoke to said, I know exactly where we need to take you. And I was taken underground in one quarry, which I subsequently first worked in. That is like a sculptural paradise because, there are these great big voids, dark voids. And
what kind of quarry was this?
This was a tufa quarry under a mountain, so tunnelling into, a quarry working by extraction. So it's going underground and you're gradually going deeper and deeper into the mountain. So there are these beautiful spaces and are intrinsically sculptural, whether you touch anything or not, they just are sculptural by nature.
Oh, hold on. So had you previously been aware of your own carving into the earth as a kind of quarrying, and that's where you thought there's a quarry?
Yeah, I had worked in a quarry in Namibia and loved the environment and loved the sort of relationship between man created and still natural. Yeah. The tension of carved spaces because of cut stone being pulled out of the quarry, and the spaces that they left, and the relationship with the surrounding environment. And I feel there's a lot of room for different works. And then in that same trip, I was taken to this open quarry. So two quarries very near each other, but one had working downwards from the ground and slowly creating this 150-metre cliff from generations of work, cutting down. And so the thing about that quarry really was this magnificent yellow ochre cliff. And I wanted to I just wanted to work there. I didn't know what I was going to do, and there were lots of spoil heaps, and then lower down where they were still cutting lovely, square geometric spaces. But so the first opportunity was to create a work underground, parallel space, which we can come to. And then when I went back, I had kept asking the quarry owner about this open quarry, and he said no, and he didn't want me there. But I knew I had to work there. I just loved it. I loved the ochre of the stone, the yellow ochre. I loved the space. I sort of knew I could bring something there that wouldn't intrude on the working of the quarry, but would be a really exciting synergy between the material and what was left and what was disused, and although I had no idea what that would be. And then, so when I went back on my third trip in 2019, I went to draw in the quarry to work out what I was going to make. And within half an hour, I had a clarity of what I wanted to make. And when I tried to test out the idea, I thought, well, why don't you come up with a few other ideas? And it was like, I had no movement. It was so clear what I needed to do. And it was a very simple premise. I couldn't begin to compete with the cliff, but I wanted the work to be about the cliff. So I thought, as I was sitting at the bottom of the quarry, I could take an eye line, a made line up to the cliff itself, through the spoil heaps. And then, almost immediately, I thought, wouldn't it be amazing if they were steps so people could climb through the spoil heaps up to the top of the quarry to then have the big cliff above them. And one of the things he said to me is, you can't work right under the cliff. I don't want you to do that for safety reasons.
Well, I was going to say, your health and safety alarm bells don't go off very often, do they?
No, but I understood that because I could see if a piece of rock fell, it would fall straight down, but it I wouldn't survive that. So I thought that was very fair. And that, but it makes, it's such an exquisite part of the work, but I didn't know that. I just thought, fair enough. So what I did was I conceived of these 3 flights of steps through, because there's a machinery track that goes in a zigzag through the quarry. So I was able to do sort of one in alignment, these 3 flights of steps, and the third one being the longest one, and following, although I kept it in a straight line, following the contour of the ground. So the steps, I wanted the steps to feel like they'd always been there. They simply had grown up overnight. It was almost like I was revealing them rather than making them. Revealing them
for a use, imagining anybody going up them.
Yes, imagining that you could then have a different perspective, in a bodily perspective, but that they were non-functional steps. They weren't going anywhere. So when you ascend them, you go up to, I then made a bit more of a platform on the last step. But there's this huge void between you and the big wall, but you have a sort of physical proximity to the wall. When you look upwards, you're really straining your neck, but you've got this physical proximity with the wall that you've never had before. On the opening of that work, I was seeing the villagers and Komatsu City Council people all in their very smart suits, and they were climbing up to the part of the quarry they'd never experienced physically before. But what's so beautiful is when you're right down in the bottom of the quarry, the original conception of the piece, what happens is all the flights join up in a line, and it's a very simple eye line because it's the same material. I was just using discarded stone for the steps. So you have a disturbance in the chaos of the spoil, and that disturbance is a very pure, very simple line leading your eye up. I love the relationship between this very light aesthetic, very almost a throwaway aesthetic, but then this, when you get to the steps, you can immediately walk on them and engage with it physically. And if you then choose to think about it, you realise that someone had to move these very big chunks of stone around. So then there's the labour of it.
So does your intervention in the form of the stairs make the whole rest of that landscape, i.e. that quarry, its own sculpture?
Yes. So in a way, my work is about not the single object of what I make. Often it's actually not the thing I make, but something else that's the essence of the work.
Yeah.
So for instance, in that piece, it's the whole experience of the environment and the way in which you can ascend the piece to experience that amphitheatre, that natural amphitheatre that quarries often create, whereby you change your sense of scale yourself by being able to walk on it. So one is you're physically interacting with the sculptural work, but 2, you're actually reorientating yourself in the quarry as a whole. Because when you see everything above you, it feels it feels enormous and you feel tiny. But when you can ascend some of it, you change your perspective. So you begin to feel something of that largesse, really, where it's a sweep, it's a stage, and so you feel an elevation, quite literally.
Do you feel that sense of largesse and sweep when confronted with having a chisel and a load of rock you've got to get through? And where do you start with that? How do you learn to work that particular rock in that particular place?
Well, I usually learn new methods on the job. I drew the piece, I got the quarry owner agreed, and I just thought, get on with it. And I started, I worked out the best sort of slabs I could see in the spoil, and I had to get them out of the spoil, and I had to learn very fast because I couldn't possibly lift these blocks of stone, so I had to learn about levering and walking stones. So a stone you can't carry, there's an awful lot of work you can do without physically lifting a stone, and then levelling, working out where I would begin. In fact, I began with the upper staircase because I knew it would be the most difficult because it was the longest one, and working out, pulling lines of string and then working out where to place that first stone. once you've begun, you've broken the ice really with yourself. You know, then you've rolled up your sleeves and you're getting on it. You're not thinking too much about where you're going with it or the weight of the work. You just think, how can I do each step? And it was super laborious. You know, I on a good day I could get 2 steps done, but that was the maximum. And in the end, it's 58 steps, and I was there for 6 weeks, and also brilliantly began to get help from a really fantastic a local farmer who had also been a builder in his earlier life and actually knew a lot more than I did, but never ever told me what to do. He would suggest things, but he taught me by example, and also by, he would watch how I would do things, and then he might suggest an alternative way that was actually much more efficient.
すごい、どうやって持ってきたの？
はい。
これ。
はい。ただー。
今日は東京で明日するから、今からこれ持ってこようかなと思ってきたのに。
はい。This very good.
ああ、フィリピン。
Yeah, very good.
おめでとう。
いやー。
おめでとう、おめでとう。万歳。
Yay!
And we had no shared language, but he was a joy to work with, Sujimoto-san. I was so privileged with that work.
It's amazing how closely this connects with several arts of place things, actually, because one of our first talks and essays was about spoil heaps in County Durham, and what happens to them, what happens to so many industrial landscapes, and whether one wants to preserve them in some way, how one lets the ecology form, and it feels like you're intervening a little bit to suggest that this unused quarry, this thing which is over in a sense, it's served its purpose.
Yes.
And yet you're giving it this new life.
Yes, definitely for the community and the council. So they have, this stone has served and created very famous buildings all around Japan because it's a beautiful colour, and it's also very heat resistant and water resistant. So it's a very useful, but it's easy to cut. And so it's a very famous stone, but they've slowly run out of the yellow stone. You know, that's partly why it's winding down. And so I think they also recognise that this is another way of celebrating their national heritage status, because it's become in Japan, that it's now on their cultural tourist map for both, and that will be a lot of local visitors coming too. And they call it a power spot, which is according to they use this word power spot. It's a fusion of a place of spiritual and artistic significance.
And they're objectively identified. It's not just that people have their private power spots.
Yeah,
it
no,
is
this has been this ascending has been identified.
Oh,
as
fantastic! Are you pleased about that?
Yeah, I think it's wonderful because it's a way of local people embracing it as a work for themselves, you know, and for the villages. It can be a place not of dereliction but of pride and rejuvenation.
Yeah.
So it becomes their piece.
Yeah.
And it's not mine. You know, I'm you know, they love their relationship with me, but you know, they're the ones who live it and work it, and Sujimoto-san will go and see it in the snow and send me pictures and go again when the snow's melted.
Well, this must be a seasonal work as
so
well.
much so.
Yeah. Because the yellow presumably is changing its hue with every change.
Yes, whether it's wet, whether it's dry,
Right.
whether it's hot, whether it's cold. In snow, you know, there are wonderful images of it. Just, you can see the steps, but it's all snow laden.
Yeah.
There was a very beautiful thing that the quarry owner said to a journalist when we opened the piece. He used this very specific word called Hanamishi, which is Japanese for what's called a flower path. And in Kabuki theatre, often the theatres, you'd have the conventional theatre, and then you'd have a sort of passage platform through the audience. And at the end of Kabuki, the actors would go up this path to have flowers thrown at them. He said she's made the flower path of my quarry, the Hanamishi of my quarry.